In this lecture, we'll learn about the collapse component. The collapse component is used to toggle content on the page. A collapse component consists of two parts, the link or button that triggered the content and the collapsible content itself. First, let's create a collapse component with the link as a trigger. We'll create an anchor tag with the href attribute pointing to the ID of the collapsible element, href collapse. Then we'll add the classes btn and btn primary to make it look like a button. The code to make the toggle function work is the data toggle attribute with the value collapse. Then we will add two attributes for accessibility, the area expanded attribute with the value false and the area controls attribute with the value href collapse. Finally, we'll give the link the text link with href. Now we need to create the collapsible element. The content can be anything, but it needs to be inside a container div with the class collapse and the ID we referred to before, href collapse. As the content inside, we'll create an alert component. We do this by creating a div with the classes alert and alert success. Then we'll add some lorem ipsum text. Let's have a look in the browser. When we click on our link, it will now show and hide the collapsible element. Let's see how this can be done using a button as the trigger. We'll duplicate the code from before and change the anchor tag to a button tag. Then we'll remove the href attribute and add the type button. Instead of referring to the collapsible element with the href attribute, we'll now do this with the data target attribute. Our value will be the ID data target collapse. And now we just need to change the value in the area controls attribute to this as well, and the ID in the collapsible element to this as well. We'll also change the text of the button to button with data target. Let's have another look in the browser. When we click on our button, it will now show and hide the collapsible element like before. Now we will see how to create an accordion component where the individual collapsible elements can be expanded one at a time. Before we start, we'll delete our code. First we have a container div with the ID Accordion, a role attribute with the value tab list, and an area multi-selectable attribute with the value true. Inside this div, we'll use the card component to structure our trigger and content. Now we create a div with the class card. And inside this, a div with the class card header. The role attribute with the value tab and the ID heading 1. This will be our trigger, so we create a heading element with a link inside. Our link will get the href attribute with the value collapse1, which will refer to our collapsible element we will create later. We'll also add the data toggle attribute with the value collapse, the data parent attribute with the value accordion, the area expanded attribute with the value true, and the area controls attribute with the value collapse1. Finally, we will add the text heading 1 to our link. Now we need to create the corresponding content. This goes inside a container div with the ID from before, collapse1, and the classes collapse and show. We'll also add the role attribute with the value tab panel and the area labeled by with the value heading 1. Inside this container div, we'll create the content block of the card component. This is a div element with the class card block. As our content, we'll use some lorem ipsum text. Now we will duplicate our card component 2 times. And change the heading 1 values to heading 2 and heading 3 respectively, and the collapse1 values to collapse2 and collapse3 respectively. Since we want the first tab panel to be expanded from the start, we will also need to remove the show class from the second and third tab panel. And change the area expanded attribute to false in the second and third heading link. Finally, we'll change the text of the headings to heading 2 and heading 3 respectively. Let's take a look in the browser. Now we see an accordion with the first tab panel being expanded from the start. When we click the different links, we can see the content being toggled and only one expanded at a time. We have now learned how to create a collapse component to toggle content on the page. Go on and continue with the coding exercise, which will help you learn the correct structure for this component. In the next lecture, we'll learn how to create and use the drop-down component.